Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Gen Alpha children are better off than previous generations in every aspect except mental health. Joining us to discuss, we have Joanna Piacenza, head of industry intelligence at Morning Consult. Joanna, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Jill, happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And I didn't even realize we're up to a new term of identifying the next generation. Explain to us what Gen Alpha is.
I know it's hard to keep up. Well, we have Gen Z. They're all the way at the end of the alphabet, right? We had to start over with Gen Alpha. So Gen Alpha are children ages 0 to 9. They are still being born and they're still going to continue to be born for the next few years. So think of them kind of roughly as millennials children. It's the best way to think about it.
So I thought it was interesting. Parents think that they're better off than previous generations, although it seems a little bit early to be able to determine that in every aspect except mental health. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's talk about some of the findings here. Screen time. Are they looking at their screens more or less than older generations?
Yeah, it's hard to call this group digitally native because it's almost like calling them oxygen native. Digital, the online world, is a huge part of who Gen Alpha is. It's how they live and breathe. It's how they're going to operate in the world. Now, that said, most Gen Alpha children are spending less than 2 hours online. Their parents are being a little bit more mindful of that screen time, trying to limit it as much as possible. As soon as we hit age 10, which again is kind of outside the Gen Alpha range, that's with kind of younger Gen Zers, that's when we see screen time bumping up to at least 3 hours every single day. Some of that might be digital learning still, as we're still in this global pandemic, but a lot of it is Disney Plus, YouTube, and games on their tablets.
What about the metaverse? How engaged are the parents and Gen Alpha? Because, some of the Gen Z, it's still even really new to that generation. And of course, when you look at millennials and even Gen X, people are having kids later these days, the metaverse is still kind of a new concept. How do they feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, you and I are probably not going home and throwing on our VR headset to wind down, or even throwing on our VR headset to go to work, but that's very much a possibility for Gen Alpha. 11% of Gen Alpha kids own a VR headset, according to their parents. And that number might seem small, but for such a new technology, it's quite large. And when we asked parents, of the children that have a VR headset, how much time is your child spending on it? It was about equivalent to the amount of time that Alpha kids are spending on a desktop computer. So they're spending about equal amounts of time using VR. So the metaverse is very much a strong possibility for our Alpha kids.
When you talk about purchasing power in this research here, are you talking about the Gen Alpha parents or Gen Alpha kids making decisions in terms of what they want and what they think they're willing to spend?
Yeah, we call this pester power within Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha might not have digital wallets quite yet, but they do have voices, and they are using those voices to really influence in purchasing among their parents. We're seeing it earliest for food and beverage brands. Think their favorite snack or their favorite drink. And also for entertainment brands, really young. Kids are being really vocal about what kind of brands they like. Further down the road, that's when we're seeing children having more of an opinion on things like apparel, things like tech. But really early on, kids are really loud about what they want to eat and what they want to watch. And I think a lot of parents watching that's probably resonating with them.
I thought it was interesting that McDonald's basically transcends against all the generations. And I thought Goldfish was cute. I mean, my kids are late teens, early 20s, and Goldfish, we buy these massive things that look like milk cartons with the goldfish in it. What about financial future?
Most Gen Alpha parents are millennials, like I mentioned, and millennials struggle with really low financial well-being and financial health. Think about this group. They've already gone through one recession during a time where many were entering the job market. That really impacts how you view the world and how you view your finances. And now many of them are going through a global pandemic while starting a young family and dealing with historic inflation. That's going to influence how they talk to their kids about money. That's going to influence how they spend money themselves. we have kind of a large group of Gen Alpha parents, which we're calling the financially fraught, that are really, really preoccupied with the financial success of their children. It's the largest group within Gen Alpha parents. It's also the youngest group within Gen Alpha parents. And what that indicates to us is that this is where this group is going. They're going to be more financially stressed and more fraught about their finances, and that's going to impact their kids.
I thought the findings on education was really interesting, that parents are as likely or more likely than all parents, Gen Alpha parents, to pursue higher education. I thought it might have been the opposite, where they would have thought more about trade school or training within companies themselves. I thought it was interesting that they were looking to instate public and profit private schools.
Same here. I thought, especially with all the conversations around student loans, the cost of tuition for higher education going up, we might see some different figures out of that. But millennials still strongly believe, and millennials, again, most likely to be Gen Alpha parents, they still believe in the power of a college education, even if as many of them are still probably dealing with loans themselves. So we're seeing a lot of Gen Alpha parents really insist that their children go to college and starting to save right away, even when many young parents are still dealing with childcare costs.
And finally, to wrap up here, Joanna, what I mentioned at the top, that they're most concerned about mental health. How do they determine that with kids that young?
I think it's just staying at home, seeing and spending so much time with your children during the pandemic. These early years are so important for socialization, developing friendships, being in different communities. And a lot of that was torn away from Gen Alpha over the last 2-3 years. Their parents are really mindful of that. And I think it's really top of mind as their kids get older and they think, how can we better set them up for a more successful social future?
All right, Joanna, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.